Wait, shouldn't this podcast have a name?
I guess so. Maybe we'll get there. I'm Raven, she, her pronouns.
I'm Trinity, she, her pronouns.
And we are a podcast with no name, but we are part of our cohort in the community planning program at UW-Tacoma. And we are here to kind of talk you through some of the craziness this past, how many years have it been, Trinity?
Only 2.
Oh my God.
It's like 4.
It feels like we've aged in dog years. My goodness, but in the best way possible. So I guess we'll start with what is this program, Trinity, and like what does it mean, considering we're in the first place we've had a class?
Yeah, so we're in the Masters of Community Planning program, which is an interesting name for whatever it is that we have done, which is community focused in some sort of planning, but is definitely not fully into either of those. So yeah, I'm not even sure how to describe this program. Like, I came to the program because I wanted to do community work. I wanted to deepen how I collaborate and build space with and for communities, specifically Black folks. So my orientation into this program was more theoretical and world building versus practical applications of like, what is zoning and how do you change that, which is not important, but wasn't the orientation I came into the program with.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I came into this program, I work in politics now, and I in policy, and I have my MPA with a focus in policy. And so even being in that program, I'm like, yeah, this doesn't really talk about the why and like who is this actually impacting. And then getting to kind of get my hands dirty with it, working in politics, which is truly an interesting thing. It's its own situation. It really was, well, who is caring for a community? And like, we're saying we're going to do all this stuff, and I'm writing buzzwords all the time, and I'm realizing no one actually understands what this means and like the weight that it really holds. And so I came into this program more of like, so what? Okay, like, so what is the disproportionate impact? What are we going to do about it? Do you even know what that means? Like, do you even know who the impact is? Like, what are we doing about it? And so it's kind of my orientation into the program. And I always tell people this is less of the traditional zoning. It's like, why was it zoned that way? And who was excluded? And how do we bring them back in?
But that's also not how it started. I don't think, like, as you're sitting in our first class, during when the first class we ever took, like, it was very much an introduction to traditional planning and the canon of planning, as these are things you should know, whether it's right or wrong or has been changing, but it's still important to know these things. And I think out the gate, we were both pushing back on those things and being, this isn't aligned with our lived experiences. This doesn't align with how we understand our communities and how the world to work. And you're not talking about these deeper, like, why does it exist in this way? Why does it happen in this way? And I think a lot of asking that question and pushing back led us to a focus on abolition and Black liberation and prefigurative politics that have guided us throughout the program.
Yeah, I remember, I think gentrification, that topic was, I think that was when we were all like, absolutely not. We were already reading craziness every day and coming into class like, John, what you got us reading? And then gentrification, I'll never forget, it says something like the way to avoid it, or the way to prevent gentrification is to avoid cynicism.
Like, gentrification isn't necessarily bad. It was, yeah.
It's the perception of it, so you just got to avoid cynicism. Huh? And it was in that moment, I think we actually bonded, because from that point on, every project somehow connected, and we connected through abolition and like our own lens of like what abolition is. And, you know, thanks to Jessie, she put the theory to our thoughts and was able to provide that structure of like, this is what this really means when you say it, right? And these are the folks who are doing the work and where you can learn from, but you can also create your own path and do all these things. And so that's when we when we got to our studio last quarter, oh my goodness, we were like, how we learn about fugitive planning and abolition, and we talking to Ruthie, and now we talk about some stairs in Tacoma. How dare we do all this amazing work? And yeah, now we're looking at stairs.
Yeah, that was a trip. It was so disconnected from everything else that we had done to come into you spend your first year of learning all these things with the anticipation that you're going to apply it in a project that's going to feel connected and meaningful to the work that you've done, and then walk into our class and it's so you're going to ask people what they would like to see on staircases and hill climbs in the city. No going into the why behind it or anything. Yeah, that was terrible.
It was really jarring. I think what we all were realizing as we were going through that project, that studio project, was, to your point, this didn't align with all the work that we were doing. It lacked depth, right? Like you're asking us to talk to people about what they would like to see on stairs, and then people are saying, well, I would like to see less homeless people there, instead of us figuring out, well, why are people unhoused and what are we doing to support them? Are we trying to make it pretty for business owners? What are we like? What is the intent behind this? Are we saying that all we're going to do is paint the stairs and walk away? Because essentially that's what planning has been this entire time. And so you want us to do the thing that we've been learning not to do, which led to, that the beginning of this quarter when we were like, absolutely not. Ain't no way.
And shout outs to Jesse again for supporting us to speak up and organize and, demand a change for this quarter. This is not how we wanted to end our year. This didn't feel meaningful or, yeah, connected to what we've done so far. And so being able to have her support to say something to our other professors, and it worked and they listened.
Yeah. And shout out to Professor Yana and Jennifer for being like, all right. I mean, I don't know how much of an option we gave, but like they listened, and we were able to shift gears, which leads us to where we are right now in this beautiful topic of abolition. And how, per usual, two Black women out here decided to take charge. And so to what we were saying earlier, we both have always, in all the projects we did, it either led into some level of abolition between Trinity and I, or something about Black liberation. That's the thing that we've been doing. And so when we had the opportunity to have this blank slate, we were like, we know exactly what we're going to do. And so, Trinity, you want to tell them what your original, your unmoving idea, which I love and support.
Yeah. So and we had the opportunity to come back and decide on a project. My personal focus has always been on, sovereignty and, people who create spaces of self-determination and liberation for black folks and indigenous folks, and brown folks, black, brown, indigenous folks in general. Um, and so my project is focusing on Black and indigenous land stewards in Tacoma who, approach their work through an abolitionist food sovereignty lens, whether they name that or not, and being able to speak to the work that they're doing and create a map of these different sites, so that if folks are looking to get connected, they, have a resource that they can point to.
I love that. It's when Trinity first said it, I was like, yeah, that's dope. I love it. And I think we unintentionally both were like, no, we're doing some form of abolition. And so for me, like I said before, I work in politics. So I have this like network of folks that I've worked with throughout my career so far, who are abolitionists in their own ways, but the system that they're in sometimes doesn't allow for that. And also recognizing that like youth programming is a means for abolition and a means to feed our kids before the system feeds on them. And so with that, I'm working with Councilmember Scott to, reevaluate how we engage with violence prevention in the city. And for me, particularly, is through an abolitionist lens, because I firmly believe that we can work within the system and outside of the system. And before we burn down the system completely, we still have our people in there. So how do we take care of them, and get them out of it so that we can burn it all down to the ground and try something different, even if we haven't seen what different is yet. So that's kind of what I'm doing, and we'll get into more details. And so a couple of things to expect. Okay, so Trinity, I keep saying abolition, you keep saying abolition. It's been the lens that we've operated in, from the beginning of this entire program. So I think it's time that we just tell everyone what abolition is. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, yeah. And to be clear, like Raven and I definitely identify as abolitionists, but the theme of abolition has been something that has run through our cohort throughout our time in the program. And so when we had the opportunity to reimagine what our capstone project would be, we decided to focus on abolition with the understanding of abolition as emancipation and rehearsal. And so folks in the cohort are looking at abolition through various lenses and various topics, and then applying our cohort definition to the work that they're doing. And as a group, we have defined abolition as the intentional movement and continuous practice of transforming the oppressive, extractive, and death-producing structures that create the conditions for criminalization. Abolition focuses on reimagining what truly keeps us safe, is rooted in experimentation, and creates an otherwise way of being in relationship with each other and the natural world that's grounded in a logic of collective care. Abolition prioritizes feeding our people so that systems of carcerality can't feed on them. So abolition is life-giving, it's prefigurative, it's presence, it's imaginative, it's transformative, relational, collective safety, and emancipation and rehearsal.
Ooh, okay. Every time we read it, I still get chills. And I think, we've always talked about that to the emancipation and rehearsal. It's, it's practicing liberation until it's permanent, not perfect, and really pushing back on this idea that, what are we going to do instead? It's like, well, we're going to care instead of punishing, right? We're going to care instead of literally any other option that gets rid of that feeds on us and our souls, our spirits, our times, our bodies, our families. Just like there's so many other things and ways of doing and being. And so I'm super excited to see how our class took abolition and applied it.
And we can care now. Like, it's not something that we have to wait for the systems to change. Abolition is very much experiment in the here and now. Create the worlds that you are hoping to make now, and as the systems are changing.
Oof.
At the same time, hopefully.
Heavy on we can care now. We don't have to wait, because, that's giving me a little, I love that. Well, you are going to have to wait until next week to hear more about how we're going to apply liberation when we talk to our cohort member in WAGU about quantum healing theory, planning theory. So,
yep. And each episode will have a different cohort member on to share about their project and how they are relating it back to abolition and emancipation and rehearsal.